And there's definitely a clear delineation between people's confidence and their sort of like feeling of like, do they have the right academic background? And what I always tell them is like, you're over indexing on the importance of a formal education in this. There isn't some magic thing that you learn there. You can absolutely learn the same things on your own. I will take in the equivalence of work experience and self-teaching over a degree any day if all the other skill sets are better.
Hey nerds, Monica here. Welcome to the Data Podcast for Nerds, where we get to talk to amazing professionals and ask them all about how they're using data to solve the world's problems. We're highlighting skills that data professionals use on a daily basis. Plus, we always include some fun bits because we're all nerds here and we love to have fun. So thank you for tuning in, and if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. And as always, folks, happy learning. Today with us, we have Jack Blandin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing. Thanks, Monica.
We start off our episodes by understanding people's origin stories. So please, if you could, tell us about your background and how you got to where you are today in your career.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to jump back to my college days where I was a physics major. And, at this time, I was a junior in college, and that was, I think, 2011. And I realized that I didn't want to do physics as my career because, the job market was relatively narrow, it was very competitive, and just, I didn't love it anymore, essentially. But I was interested in, at the time, what was called data mining, which is now called data science, machine learning, data analysis. But back then, the terms were like big data and data mining. And I liked that as an idea for a profession because I was always a quantitative thinker, liked to work with data and extract insights, naturally drawn to graphs and plots and things like that. And so I wanted to pursue a career there, but at this time there wasn't such a thing as like a master's degree in data science. It didn't exist. So instead, what I did was I got a master's degree in software engineering because that was recommended to me to learn how to program if I wanted to be a data scientist. So I got that degree, ended up getting a job as a software engineer, and really enjoyed it. I was a full stack developer for a company called Trunk Club. They're like Stitch Fix, similar setup. And really enjoyed that. Did that for a couple of years, kind of forgot about data science and data mining altogether. And after about 2 to 3 years of doing this, I started to get that itch again for data, and there was something missing. And I enjoyed building with software. I really did love that. But there was a data science team at Trunk Club, and I started to get like into that. Like I was talking with the people on the team, saw what they were doing, saw like how Python and machine learning had gotten more advanced at this time. And so I bought a book on like, Python for machine learning, went through it, loved it, and was like, I want to do this full time. This is what I want to do. And so then it became a question of, okay, well, now how do I switch into that position? And so basically what I did was I just kept harassing the VP of engineering at my company to let me switch to data science. And after being rejected maybe 9 or 10 times, they finally agreed to an apprenticeship that let me join the team. Did a project like part-time while doing like my main software engineering responsibilities. And then eventually they let me switch full-time.
That's awesome. Good job for like sticking to it and keep asking so that you can make that transition.
Yeah, no, it was like basically like you just I had to convince them that I was never going to say no, or I was never going to stop trying, and that they might as well just like let me switch because I'm going to keep asking. And so eventually they did. And then, my career kind of took off from there. So we got a different job in machine learning after that. I had some success with some machine learning at a company called Go Health, which was where I went to after Trunk Club. And that success kind of fueled my growth as a career. Like I became a manager and then a director. From there, went on to Wayfair to be like in a bigger environment, working with like larger teams, larger data sets, like bigger, scale challenges. For me, realized that wasn't a fit for me. Like I'm not a big tech person, so I went the polar opposite route. Went to a small startup at Phi, and was able to kind of build out a team and build out the platform from scratch, and that was really fun.
That's awesome. So, when you were at Trunk Club switching roles within that company, do you think that was easier of a way to kind of break into machine learning than it would have been to jump ship into a different company?
I do. And the reason for that is because, for roles like machine learning, or any role where it's sort of like a chicken and the egg problem, like you need experience before anyone wants to hire you, but how do you get the experience in the first place? It's like you have to leverage whatever your unique value add is. So in my situation, I brought two things to the table that enabled that. One was that I was a software engineer, and that team had been the data science team at Trunk Club was struggling to like figure out like a framework for deploying their models. Like this was like 2017, so like ML ops was like just becoming a term. Like there wasn't like ML flow had just been created. Like it was barely used by anyone. It was less of a standardized process as it is now. And so by me coming there, it like helped them figure out how to integrate their models with the rest of the business. And then the other thing was that I was very familiar with all of the backend tech stack that we had and the various services that we were running. So whenever someone wanted to implement a model and integrate it with the service, I knew like exactly how to do it and could actually just go do it, as opposed to having the software engineering team do it for us. So those two things like brought real value to that team in a way that nobody else did. And that would have been harder to leverage at a new company where I didn't have that insider knowledge.
Absolutely. And you had more of that, what people call domain knowledge in the
Mhm.
company and how it runs. And so you can kind of like see the full picture of things while you're working, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it is very. It's much easier to like be like an IC like to develop if you already have the knowledge of big picture. It's kind of a similar paradigm to when you're like being a manager versus being an IC, where from the manager's perspective, it's like easy to see big picture because you're not in the weeds. But as an IC, it's hard to see big picture when you're so like preoccupied and your mind's filled up with like just nitty gritty details. But in this case, it was like I didn't have to learn the systems, the tools, the domain knowledge, while also figuring out the machine learning part. It was like I could just fixate on that one part.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So go into more about what you do today and what types of problems you solve.
Yeah. Well, so I'll do two. I'm gonna answer this two ways because I think there's what I'm actually doing day to day right now, and then there's what I was doing most recently before what I'm doing right now, which I think is also relevant. So if it's okay, I'll answer this in two parts.
Absolutely.
So let me talk about actually my most recent full-time role, which was at Phi, where I was the VP of data science. So Phi is a company that makes smart dog collars. So you can think of it at like we started out as like a GPS tracking collar, where if your dog escaped, like you can find it, you can see where they are. It's not an AirTag. An AirTag does not work in like unless you're like within range of like Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. So this is like an actual GPS thing. It's like a Garmin. And if you live on a farm or you have like a husky who tends to run, like this is like a big deal. But it's also like a Fitbit, like a step counter for dogs. And so my like when building out a data team for that type of a company, like the company is like 150 people or so, you're really building everything out from scratch, and that's both awesome because you get to choose everything, but it's also really challenging in that like every decision you make is crucial and critical because it means that like you're going to have to maintain this over time. Like nothing is really decided for you. So that was definitely challenging. But building out that team was what I spent a lot of my time doing while I was there. So I spent the first like 4 or 5 months just getting the lay of the land of the company, figuring out what data we had, what we could use it for, how we wanted to like represent that to the company, figuring out what the level of skill was from each stakeholder group in terms of consuming data, because that's like that helps dictate how we want to present it to them. And so I was sort of figuring all that out. Once I had that figured out, then it was deciding what platform and tools do we want to use, which is like sifting through what is out there, which is easier said than done. And then it was hiring for that team, helping develop a platform myself. Again, I was like, part of a small team. So even though I'm like a VP level, I'm still actually doing hands-on work. And then kind of like building that team over time so that I could step back more when I needed to. It also involves some machine learning too. Like right before I left, we had just finished like our first proof of concept machine learning model, which is really fun. So that's what I did before what I'm doing right now, which I'll touch on briefly, which is I'm actually building a tech recruiting platform for heavily focused on data candidates, of helping data candidates find jobs by providing them a centralized hub where they can show off their skills, and then helping employers find talent by being able to have access to more information about a candidate and what makes them unique and what their strengths are that you can't necessarily find on a resume or LinkedIn.
Oh, that's really awesome. How far are you into that project?
Yeah. So, well, far enough that I quit my job to do this full time, and I'm all in. So I've been doing it for a few months. I should also touch on the fact that I was doing my PhD like while I was working the last 6 years, and I just am now wrapping that up. So this was I quit my job back in November, defended my thesis in December, and then had some papers that I had to finish up over January and February. So I've really been like full time on this, maybe for like 6 weeks or so. But I've got a couple clients that I'm working with and helping them hire for. And the idea that I have is that I'm acting as essentially a specialized technical recruiter in order to build out like a foundation for this business where I have cash flow coming in, I'm getting firsthand experience as a recruiter, and then I'm designing the platform based off of my experiences working as like in the system. And it both provides cash flow for the platform, but it also provides a test bed for me to try new things. Like when I want to experiment, like, is this going to work? Like I can actually use my recruiting service to try that. So it's like a fast feedback loop for iteration.
That's amazing. I'm excited for that for you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, so it's fun, but it's not the same as doing data science and machine learning. It's very different, and realizing that there are a lot of skills that I'm still developing.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's like the joy of any type of job, right? Is that you're always building those skills and that continuous learning.
Yeah, it's definitely refreshing. It's like it's mentally challenging and exhausting, but in a good way.
Absolutely. Talking about good things, let's get into fun bits. Hey, nerd, are you looking for a career in data? I would absolutely love to help you out. I just launched a data career strategy program that helps folks break into data without breaking anything. I provided a link in the show notes if you want to learn more information about it. Now, back to the fun bits. You mentioned that you used to look at baseball cards as a
Yes.
child, and that was kind of like you were always destined to be a data nerd.
Yeah, so it's funny because I wrote like a LinkedIn post like 6 months ago, and it was like this is when I look back at my career, this is like the first sign that I can see like, oh yeah, I was meant to be in this field. And I have this vivid memory of like laying on the floor. I must have been 6 years old because I moved to my new house, to my family's newer house when I was six. And I remember this being at my old house. So I was 6 years old, and I had my binder of sports cards out, and where you like flip the pages, like you've got like a binder full of cards. And I used to stare at the backs of them and where all the stats are. And I remember like I would sit there for hours just looking at it. And one time my dad saw me doing that. He's like, "Why are you memorizing stats like of like the players?" And I didn't like my communication skills weren't good enough at this time to articulate what I was doing. But for me, what was cool, and I actually still do this even to this day, is I think it's really cool to see someone's career laid out as like just like a single table where each year is like their stats, and to see it like progress over time. Like if you look at like Michael Jordan's career, you see this pattern of like very high scoring, very high numbers, and like a lot of turnovers, just like kind of this like wild, talented kid out of control. And then you see it start to like really like hone in where his like shot percentage starts to increase, but his rebounds and steals and blocks are lower because he's not as energetic. But it's like you see this trend that like you can see through numbers and through representations that for whatever reason for me is very fascinating. And so my insights as a 6 year old probably were not that deep, but like I liked to look at the numbers, and that was enjoyable to me to the point where I would stare at it for hours. So that looking forward to my career in data, it's not surprising that that happens now that I look back on that.
Absolutely. And with your job platform that you're building out right now, I
Mhm.
envision you recreating people's resumes to baseball cards.
Like just staring at the stats of them or something like that. Yeah. No, it's so yeah, that's actually a good point. I actually had not made that connection. But something that I'm thinking through right now is actually around, like, let's say that there was sort of some tabular representation of someone's career that told you like their full story, and like what are those data points? What does that look like? Because that's sort of the challenge with recruiting and hiring is that for instance, like the first 2 minutes of a conversation with somebody, you learn so much about them that you really cannot get through any other means. Like just having somebody interact with you and your style of communication, hearing somebody put into words, like what they've been working on, what they think is important. It's like you get this flood of information that is very hard to simulate through like some, tabular mode or some score. And really, I think that's what a lot of these other platforms are missing out on is that you can put all the scores you want on somebody, but like to a hiring manager, that doesn't go very far because it's
Yeah.
like what they care about is like how they resonate with them as like it's the comparison I make, which I'm hesitant to say, but I think it's true, is I think hiring is actually more similar to online dating than it is to, let's say, college admissions, where it's like you're just trying to filter out the best. Because I don't think that hiring is truly about the best. It's the best for a given situation, which is
Yeah.
like it's like a double-sided relationship.
Absolutely, because a lot of hiring managers that I talk to, they sometimes don't care that you are the best at a technical skill as long as you show that you have the
Mhm.
desire to learn something and you're like a true good human, then they're like they will be much better of a fit on the team than, just some person that just has too many technical skills. Too many technical skills, is that a thing?
No, I totally agree. And like my style, when I've been a hiring manager, which I was for the last 5 years, I was usually more interested in finding people who I thought could solve problems independently and know when to come back and ask me questions when they needed to, than to have the skill in house. And the reason for that is because like you can pretty much, if somebody's like smart and like has some decent foundation in tech, you can pretty much teach them anything. The challenge becomes like 6 months in, are you still having to coach them and give them like spoon feed them work, or can they go off on their own and do that on their own? Because as a manager, that's like in order to leverage yourself, you need to scale your team, and you can't scale your team if you're kind of like hand holding everyone and giving them specific instructions. So I always valued independent thinkers and problem solvers and good communicators over any particular tech stack experience.
Absolutely. So you mentioned about scoring as a maybe alternative to this resume building, right? And something similar that you had mentioned, you look at all the scores on IMDB before you watch
Oh
any
yeah.
movie.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it drives my wife nuts because I'm like super particular about TV shows and I get really bored really fast. And if it's not very high quality and sustained high quality, I will like lose interest and like want to quit the show. And where she's like invested and wants to keep watching it. But what I do is, so like because of that, I like won't invest in watching a show until I see enough reviews emerge that one indicate it's high quality. So like, nothing below an 8.0 unless it's a certain type of show that tends to have lower ratings because it's like a niche audience. But I look
Mm-hmm.
for also like the distribution of ratings, because what I'm looking for is this a mainstream show? Because I tend not to like those as much where it's like everybody likes it, because I tend to get bored because it feels cliche to me. So what I look for is a bit of like um, basically like a multimodal peak where there's like a lot of people who are tens and then maybe some others who are like eights. Because what that tells me is that it appeals to a broad audience, but also there's this niche of people who like love it, and that's typically where I find the shows that I like. So I'm
Okay.
like my wife is like, "Do you want to watch a show?" And I'm like evaluating like the skew distribution of the ratings, and she's like, "Oh my god!" But yeah,
Oh goodness. So again, this makes so much sense for where you are today because you look very heavily at the movies to see if they will be a good fit for your watching status.
I'm basically trying to save myself like the time and energy of watching a show that I won't like, and I've done it too many times to where I should have checked and I didn't, and so now I just overly obsessively check.
Tie into hiring somebody, you don't want to spend the time and energy in training those people when you could have done all of your upfront work. I'm
Yeah,
I'm still
yeah.
leaning towards you need to rebuild the resume into either this baseball card or an IMDb page.
Yeah, I mean, so it's definitely like I think that I've taken home with me some of like the stuff that I've learned at work, which is like
Mhm.
being data driven and like understanding when and how to use data to inform decisions. And actually, on that note, a lot of times people think that like being data driven is like you use data to make every decision, and I actually don't agree with that. I don't think that's the right as a very data obsessed person. I don't think that's the right way to go because you end up over indexing on certain data points that are not perfectly representative of your target situation. And so I think there is like sort of like a trade-off that you have to make where it is good to use data, but not in every situation. Like sometimes, relying on your intuition is totally fine and just more effective. Um, but definitely in terms of watching TV, if I'm going to commit, several hours of my time, I'll spend 2 minutes looking at the reviews, and that has saved me like a lot of effort. Um, yeah, I think something else we were talking about was the uh, my Fitness Pal recordings that I did. Um,
Yes, you tracked your fitness for 7 years straight. Is that right?
I did, yeah. So up until I think maybe January of this year, I had a 7 year streak of logging everything that I ever ate, and it was both. It was for a few reasons. One is because I was like most of that time I was very into health, and like exercising and being healthy. Another reason was that I would love to look at my data and see like tracking like my either like my weight or my like caloric intake over time. Especially when I was like training for a marathon, I was like looking to see like am I maintaining this? Am I losing weight? Am I gaining weight? Just to see like what the pace was at. Um, but it got to a point where I was no longer really looking at that anymore, and it kind of felt like compulsive. And so, as opposed to like valuable, so I actually deliberately stopped, and that was very difficult for me. It was like
Mm.
it sounds insane, but actually it was hard to stop because I'm like I'm gonna lose my streak. I'm not gonna have all this information. But once I did stop, it was like refreshing. But it's sort of like representative of like who I am, which is that like if I could quantify myself in terms of data and then use that to inform like my future decisions or to learn more about myself, 100% would. Like I think there's like a group on LinkedIn called like the quantified self, where it's like figuring out ways to use like an Apple Watch or like an Aura ring to learn more about yourself and like your health. And I'm very very into that of like learning more about yourself, and personally like security and privacy I couldn't care less. I'm like if I can learn more about myself, I'm more than happy to share that information.
That hurts my heart.
Well, let me rephrase. If anyone wants to look at my data, go for it.
Okay,
If
okay.
you use that to tell me more about myself, I care because that's what everyone says is like, well, aren't you worried about these companies having your data? I'm like, not really. If what if they can like if you want to use that data for to help me in some way, even if it's to sell me something, sure, try it. I don't care. Yeah,
No, that's fair. As long as the companies are using it for ethical purposes to help
sure.
others
Yeah,
out and understanding themselves better, of course, yes.
yeah, right.
So, you talked about learning more about yourself. When you're looking to learn new things, what are kind of like your go to resources?
Lately what it is and first let me start out with like my strategy for how I learn. I don't like to learn things theoretically or academically first and then implement them, which is actually a common paradigm that never sync like the theoretical or academic part leading up to the hands-on never sticks with me when I do it that way. What does work is that when I try to do something first hands-on and then after trying that and struggling with that for a bit, then go and learn, like, okay, take a course on it. For example, like with like LangChain, like last year when I was learning that, I was like, I'm just going to mess around with this API and start to learn things on my own through hands-on experience. And then, got something working, but then I went and took a course on it. And it was like, oh, like everything sinks in much better once you have a little bit of a foundation. So that's the paradigm that I like to use. And so usually it's like get to a proof of concept as fast as possible, and then find some either course. Lately it's been YouTube videos, but basically it's like I look for some sort of curated resource where it's like learn this in 12 hours or less, because I'm not going to invest more time than that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I don't know. What's yours? What's your favorite resources? I actually don't have that many like specific go-tos. I kind of just find it whenever I need it.
I do a lot of YouTube tutorials because I'll do like some DIY stuff around the house, and that's my
Mm,
go-to for that stuff. If I'm learning new stuff, like around data, again, the internet to try to find the best resources. So it's just a mix of courses, YouTube. I finally started using ChatGPT to help me out a lot more. Yeah.
nice. How's your experience with ChatGPT going?
I used ChatGPT for the first time in real applications at the hackathon that me and you just went on. That was sponsored by Posit. Yes, it was actually my first hackathon, and they encouraged the use of ChatGPT. So I was like, okay, let's see what this is about. And I thought it was good. Of course, I mean, we were on a time crunch of what was it, 3 hours. So it was just all kinds of, awesome chaos. But I thought it was good.
Yeah. Yeah, that was tough for me as well, because it was like I wasn't used to working in that kind of an environment, and being given a new data set, a new package to work with, and a time crunch, and new people to work with. I never worked with those people. It was a lot in a very short amount of time. So that was challenging to say the least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But did you have fun?
I did. I had a blast. That whole weekend was a blast and more fun than I even expected it to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was really great meeting, the 30 plus data nerds out there, and I learned a lot.
Likewise, same here.
So, do you have any other final recommendations or words of encouragement for the listeners out there?
Yeah, I do. So one thing I wanted to talk through, which I know people hear this a lot, but I think is very important to reinforce, is especially for this type of like podcast for like people getting into data. There's something that I've noticed is that first of all, everyone has imposter syndrome. I have it to this day, and I've been in data and like software engineering for almost a decade, and I still have it, and I don't ever expect to not have it. Within the last few years, I have realized that that is a feeling that will never go away. It is just like something that you can sort of like smother and put into a corner for the most part. But there are days where I'm feeling low and it comes back, or I see something really impressive and I'm like, oh, I can't do that. And I want to I want to articulate that that is a natural feeling to have, because people tend to show off themselves at their best. And as a result, people, like everyone else, feels like inferior for that. And I can tell you that some of the people who I have met and worked with, especially the ones who really sell themselves as being like experts, there's definitely kinks in the armor all over the place. And you may not always see those, but they are there. And like everyone has these, everyone has gaps. There's no one who's an expert in everything. So I always encourage people to like embrace that imposter syndrome, like let it flow. It's fine. It's natural. You'll learn to overcome it like the more you have success. But I do think that's really important, especially I've noticed it is more paramount in people who never got a degree in something with related to computer science or data science. I've managed, probably like 30, 40 people at this point, and there's definitely a clear delineation between people's confidence and their sort of like feeling of like, do they have the right academic background? And what I always tell them is like, you're over indexing on the importance of a formal education in this. There isn't some magic thing that you learn there. You can absolutely learn the same things on your own. And personally, as someone who has a ton of academic experience in CS and data, that I don't put a whole lot of value in it. I will take in the equivalence of work experience and self teaching over a degree any day if all the other skill sets are better. And so I want to emphasize that because I think, if a lot of the people who are listening to this are not coming from a CS academic background, like, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. You can definitely learn these topics on your own.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I like to make imposter syndrome my friend. Much like when
Mm,
you learn things from failure, you learn things from imposter syndrome about yourself, about the situations that you're going through. So it's not going away, like Jack just said. So make it your friend.
yeah, I like it. Love it.
If any of the audience members have any questions for you, where can they find and or follow you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn right now. Well, I will always be on LinkedIn. That is the only place where they can find me right now. So, Jack Blandin on LinkedIn. However, I am starting to put some ideas together on both a newsletter and a podcast, and so more to come there. But as of right now, you can find me on LinkedIn and my random thoughts that I post throughout the week.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Jack, for coming on the show with us.
Thanks, Monica, for having me.
Absolutely. And as always, folks, happy learning.